Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the first episode by your team Acting Lead. And what our purpose is, we are going to be deep diving and discussing companies, corporations, and organizations and really see where are they? Are they fair? Are they treating their employees nicely? And do they have that diversity and inclusion piece? So, as we profile these large companies, we just want you all to go on the journey with us and kind of make up your mind and think about these things and even apply this to your own company. I am joined by my co host, Mr. Corey Seague, and Miss Aisha Thomas. How's it going, guys?
Man, it's all good. You
Awesome.
know how I'm doing.
Yes, good, good.
So, the company that we're starting with today in person specifically is Ellen DeGeneres from the Ellen DeGeneres Show. And Aisha, would you kind of just start us off with the research you've done behind that and kick this thing off?
Yes, yes. So the reason why we chose this, well, I actually pitched this because I've been kind of following what's going on, and I think that this is a great company, like big organization to kind of look at because if many of you all don't know, right now Ellen is facing a restructure. When we talk about the rise and the fall, it's nothing in the negative sense, but it's pretty much when a company experiences something that shakes it up. And a lot of times it's just like COVID. There's some companies that unfortunately didn't wasn't able to push through and had to shut down, and it's kind of like they're in a season right now with everything that's going on in regards to some allegations and some things that they're saying happened within the company. So of course, I mean, Ellen has been around since 2003. They've had about over 80 wins, awards that they've won, over 100 nominations, and they were at the top. This was a place where happiness ruled. I mean, anybody that's watched the Ellen show, you just get excited because I always think of her getting up and dancing and having such a good time. But how did that turn into now there were allegations of discriminatory behavior, sexual harassment, I mean, unfair treatment. And that information started to come out more and more, where essentially Warner Brothers had to do an internal investigation and identify what the issue was. And it really shaped up what was happening. And what they've been pretty much trying to do is identify and gut out the issue and make some transitions currently and really fix, if possible, this issue that's been kind of festering within the company. Because again, it went from being this happy place and then throughout the years, something changed, something has shifted where now employees were unhappy. They were saying they weren't being treated fairly. So what we were going to talk about today is really what happens, and throughout these sessions is talking about what happens when companies have these shake-up experiences. They're at these peaks. Everyone knows their name. They're winning awards. They look great, the best places to work. But then something happens, and the question is, will they continue to, or are they going to find a place where they can rise from this? Or unfortunately, are they going to fall? And pretty much that'll be the end of that. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So that's what's going on, is really identifying what's going on within these companies to try to identify solutions and remedy those. So of course, like when I was doing my research, one of the things that was discussed was like the initial goal of the company. She said that on day one of our show, I told everyone in our first meeting that the Ellen DeGeneres show would be a place of happiness. No one would ever raise their voice, and everybody will be treated with respect. So I kind of would just have us like kick off and talk about when it comes to a company's created, they create those mission, vision, and values. Why is that important? Why is it important that companies create that and make sure they maintain that behavior? Because again, you see that in the beginning, this was the goal. Make this be a happy place. No one got disrespected. Nobody raised their voice. But again, unfortunately, things change. So I want us to kind of talk about that first.
Absolutely. Corey, do you want to jump in right there and kind of give your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's when you're creating a company and like when you're creating this vision, you're always sitting there and you're saying, okay, what's my values, right? Like what do I want to pour back into the people? And they're like, okay, I want inclusion and I want people to feel, fine. And we all look at Ellen and it's like Ellen is happy-go-lucky on every single show I've ever seen her on. She's like happy and she's like inviting you into her home, which is the stage and stuff. She a game show one time where even on there, it was like you can tell that it's like she was underlyingly rooting for all the people to win. It was like, hey, if I can give everybody money, I could. But I think sometimes we get lost in the business side of it and forget what exactly is going on in that. And so some of the things, that I had been reading up on was the time frames for shooting, right? Like if you commit to a certain time frame and you forget about the little people, and that it's not necessarily the little people, but those are all the cogs that run into your business or help your business run. All of a sudden you're like, nope, got to shoot at this time on short notice. And they're like, these people have families. And so now they're explaining to their husband or wife or whatever, their kids, like, oh, I gotta run. Like, I know I said it was at this time. And so if you think about it, these things start to happen over and over and over. And that's just one example for it. They start to happen, and then, the culture starts to deteriorate. There starts to be friction inside of the company. There starts to be the stuff that y'all used to laugh about. Now you're like, oh my God, here we go again. Because that simple thing just turns your business into kind of like this festering kind of cancer type of thing. And a lot of times we don't realize it because we're winning awards. We're on TV shows. We see the bank accounts rolling in. We see the glitz and the glamour and the fame, and the person that we're uplifting is Ellen, and she's one of the top people out there. Shout out to Ellen, by the way. She's from Louisiana. But one of the top people, right? And so you're like, hey, we're doing great. Like everything's fine. The profit is there. The business is running, all that stuff. And then you simply forget sometimes what's really what was the mission? What was the goal? What are the values? And because you get caught up in all the everyday life, all of a sudden you're looking at something like this. So
What you got on that perspective, Tyrus?
And I agree with Corey, and that's kind of what I think as well. When you're winning awards, when things are going great, the people at the top, like Ellen, she doesn't have her finger on the pulse for every single decision that's going on. That's why they have team leaders, executives, managers, HR. Those are the people who are over that. They should be watching, and there should be a culture of or an open door policy. So if something's going on, that thing or that event can get pushed up, and Ellen really doesn't touch that. Of course, since it's her show, is named after her, she's the one that gets the flag. Well, why isn't
yeah,
Ellen doing it? And isn't Ellen supposed to be the happy person, the person who says everybody's going to get along and we won't argue? Well, when I researched this, it says in 2018, some of these allegations were brought up and nothing had been done about it. So, where's that gap? What happened? Who did they speak to and why wasn't it looked at? Was it fear of retribution or reprisal for you speaking against certain people? Or is it really a lower level event between employees where your executives just don't get involved? So, pulling back the layers on that, it takes a lot. It's just not cut and dry, black and white. That, oh, Ellen should have known or should have handled this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that because, it's the show is named after her. But even if you look at the structure of Ellen and the layers, I mean, you have the show producer being Telepictures, the distributor is Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is doing the investigation. There's so many layers, and sometimes individuals will be the face of the show. Or again, we had that conversation too, Corey, about Jeff Bezos. That's the face, that's the person that you know. But the reality is, just like you said, Tyrus, you hire people into these roles. And as you're moving up the top, you hope that you have the right people in place and the right leaders in place for them to go in and basically support the organization effectively so this doesn't happen. So what was the breakdown? Was it a fear of reprisal? Because you have that happen a lot of times where one person might speak out, but nobody does because they're thinking about their family. They're thinking about reprisal. And also, maybe it's the media industry. They might feel like, well, if I speak out, who's going to hire me on their show ever again? Because there might be a culture of silence that has been the norm that, we've heard like stories blow up and you hear about all these casts that had issues, but why was there silence in the first place? And it is difficult when you have employees, team members in spaces where they don't feel like they can voice an opinion. I got some studies, and it said that the study said that 53% of workers said their place of employment brings no happiness. 53%. Wow. 58% of managers don't receive management training. 58% of employees trust strangers more than managers. So even, in this space of leadership development, a lot of times we look at and we give people these roles, these titles, but are they effectively developed in those areas? Do they have the skills and the knowledge and the ability to even uphold the mission and the values that you created? And do they even know how to do that? So what do you guys say about that? What do you say about, the aspect of like that leadership development and the importance of it and how that might have prevented or changed the outcome of this story? I mean, again, the story is still developing, but could have possibly prevented it from getting to here.
Yeah, I think the stats that you just threw out there, that's that, right? I mean, how many people in that organization never received any formal leadership training, right? And so then we put people in these positions and say, hey, go lead, right? Like we look at one of the topics we've been talking about is like the diversity officers, right? The chief diversity, whatever the name, the title is, right? And it's always just conveniently a minority, right? So then we ask ourselves the question, are we actually putting someone that's qualified in that position? Not to say that these people aren't. Are we putting them in a position that they're qualified to do? Or are we saying optically, I'm going to put this person in this position because then people will look at my group and say, ah, they're diversity officer. That person is they're part of the diversity because they're a minority. I mean, if you look at the list here, and I'll let y'all get to that in a second. But you look at the list, it's a overwhelmingly the same person over and over and over again. But then you get to certain things like the executive vice president, chief enterprise inclusion officer is what it's called, right? She's of Hispanic descent, right? Latin descent. But then you look at every other chief revenue officer, you look at chief technology officer, you look at general counsel, like those types of things. Where's the diversity in that, right? Where are the people in that? But like you said, just bringing it back to like, are these people even qualified to be in these positions? And I'm sure we've run across many companies at this point that, we start to talk with them and they're sitting here like, oh yeah, that's a great question. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's leadership 101, right? Like, what's the pulse of your people right now? And they say, oh yeah, everybody's great. And then we go out into the floor and then look at, what the culture is like, and everyone's like, please get me out of here. I'm thankful for you being here, right? And so it's not a knock on them, it's just a disconnect again of what, are you trained? Do you have a pulse, with your floor? Do you have, or your department? Do you truly understand what goes into it? Because another thing that we want to consider too is, do you still understand what it takes to do that job, right? So, and I'll use Ellen for example. A cameraman, back in the 80s is probably way different than a cameraman in 2020, right? A director in 1975 is a lot different than a director in 2020 because there's so many changes, there's so many things doing. A lot of times 6 months will pass, 1 year will pass, and you can lose touch, with what actually goes down in that job or what goes on in that job code, or I should say job frame, I should say. But that's the thing is like, without the proper training, knowing that people aren't engaged, we know that statistic, that people, you got people out here who are saying, hey, to get rid of my superior, I will not take a raise if you just get rid of them, right? So when you look at things like that, it's like, are we truly tapping into the leadership side versus the business side of things? And are we still practicing those principles rather than saying, hey, it looks like it's running right now, we'll just keep it running, we'll just keep it going? But yeah, I can go on that all day. Y'all know about that. Look, man, I'm gonna let you take it away, Tyrus.
So when I'm looking at organizations like this, what begins to, for me, cause confusion is it's the Ellen DeGeneres show. It's produced by Telepictures. It's distributed by Warner Brothers. Whose values are we following? Who's in control? Who
My.
who's really calling the shots? Because at that point, she can say what she wants to say, but then as you alluded to, Corey, when you look at the Warner Media Group leadership team, white male dominates that team. So who's really making the decisions? Who's really calling those shots? What culture is really getting pushed? And from my perspective, what it seems like is great. Yes, I have what I want for my show, but I don't have anybody putting teeth behind that. I don't have anybody pushing that. And since I'm not directly involved in the case of Ellen, and in the case of probably any other host, since I'm not directly involved every day, the leadership teams probably just do not get that connection. They don't have that steady feedback and that building. So they're just operating day in, day out. Let's get the show on. Let's get it done. Let's income coming in. People are paid. But are we really doing what's necessary for our team, for our people? So when I look at this, I look at just who's leading who and who's making all the decisions.
Oh, that was deep. And I love that because yeah, there's so many layers. And again, we looked at it from the aspect of is Ellen DeGeneres, but there are layers. So who values? Who are we following? Whose mission are we following? And you would think that as you go up the chain, that the top will say, okay, this is our values and our mission, and anybody that we bring under it should basically connect to that. So that is such a powerful like reflection piece that a lot of companies, you know, leaders out there, CEOs, you want to think about as you're building out and you're coming up with your vision, right? So even if you think about mission, again, a mission is the objective I can't talk objectives and plan to reach objectives. So that's the plan to reach those goals. The vision is the desired future. So you had a vision and you're saying, listen, we're at Telepictures level or Warner Media. This is the vision. This is how we're going to get there. And as you're creating that, like you have to make sure, again, it says another part of it, they says sometimes mission and visions kind of connect. It says it's combined to provide a company's purpose, goals, and values. You have to make sure that it reaches any other entity that you bring on, because one division, one section, one leader can literally take the waters for the entire organization. So for example, I served in the military, Tyra served in the military. And one of the things that I do, I'm currently serving, and I'll meet people who will say the Air Force, or they'll refer to the specific branch of military. And I'm like, well, I mean, yes, I've had hiccups throughout my career, but to just tie it to the Air Force in total, I can't do that. But when they're speaking and they're discussing about their experience, they always say, well, when I was in the Air Force, when you were with that leader or when you were with that organization. And we have to realize that as we are creating these visions and we're getting to the point where we're opening up these different pockets and entities and we're putting people there, we need to also make sure that they don't have their own separate identity, that it still falls under the company values, the mission, and the vision. If not, you run into this issue and now they're looking at the person at the top like, what did you do? Like, what's wrong with you? What's up with that? So I think I love that you highlighted that, because again, we don't want to get away with anything that we're touching, any brands we're connecting with, any partnerships that we're connecting with. Do they still fall in line to the company mission and values? Do they fall in line with your goal? Are they going to help keep your reputation well? And yes, there will be some bad apples, but then what's the accountability? Because you talked about that too, Tyrus. You talked about like in 2018, hey, there was some things that were said, but now it seemed like when it hit the fan, now actions are being taken. So what happened before where no action was taken prior? So I really wanted us to like kind of switch and ask ourselves, what is more important? The leaders, the employees, or the clients? Because one of the things that we talked about before is that a lot of people did come out and say, listen, I've worked with Ellen before, I've worked with this company before, and I had a great experience. But essentially, when you look at the allegations and the information that they put out, they said it was more of the low tier, the younger employees that had these experiences. So although at the top tier, you're getting this quality experience, which unfortunately, the reality is people at the top do get a different type of experience. But when you look at people they consider low tier, they're not of value, or maybe they're just some employee and they're not this high class celebrity. There can be treatment that might be different. So yes, you can come out and say, I had this amazing experience. However, when you start getting into the weeds of people that aren't on that same social class or on that quote unquote level, it's a different experience. So what is more important when we look at this, when a company is coming together? Is it the leaders? Is it the employees, or are the clients? Because without clients, having clients, we're not going to be able to stay afloat. So what do you guys have to say about that?
Yeah, but check this out, Aisha, before we even get to it. And Tyrus, I'm gonna pass this to you because I really want to know what you got to say on this one. Because he's all about like the system top to bottom and like he'll break you down in a heartbeat. But here's the thing, right? So when I'm doing my research, I'm looking at the executive vice president, and I think he has two roles, executive vice president and human resources officer. The number one thing that it said his focus was what the issue was with the Ellen show initially, I should say. They didn't find anything, but it was diversity and inclusion.
Mhm.
So who again, let's go back to whose vision is it, right? Like whose vision are we going after? Because you got your executive vice president, which is really your right hand man to the CEO, saying my number one focus is right, and I'm going off of that because that's the first thing that's cited on his focuses or values is his diversity and inclusion. Like you know, at what point do we then lose touch with the rest of the people to be able to do that? So I'm gonna get off that soapbox, but that just goes back to show you, like, although these officers, although these very high up, these C-suite level people have this certain mindset and this certain vision, right? Um, you threw out the stat that said, what is it, 53% of people don't have a management development or leadership development course. But then I think the stat is somewhere it says 46% of people, 46% of executives say that the leadership development is important. So what's the disconnect in that, right? So let's just round it up. 50% of executives say that's important. 53% of companies are saying I don't get it. So where's the divide on that, right? So the message gets lost. But Towers, I'm gonna let you take it away. Um, I'm curious to see what you say about who's the most important.
To piggyback a little bit off of what you talked about, Corey, I think when we're developing our mission statements, our goals, our aspirations, our vision, they sound good. And so when we know that and we're going to throw a little bit of the disc into this, our high eyes, our D's, vision casters, dreams, goals. But then where's that process? Where is that information in the backdrop? Where is that actual concrete plan that we're going to put into effect to see this through? Yeah, I want my company to be great. Ellen said that it would be a place of happiness. No one would ever raise their voice and everyone should be treated with respect. What is the concrete plan for that? That sounds good. It sounds great. But how do we make that? How do we track that? What are the KPIs or what are the milestones that we have to make sure that we're hitting this? And now to pivot into who who is important. Is it the staff, the leaders, the employees, or the clients? Without your client base, you won't have a business. You won't have a show. You won't have people that come in and watch. So you have to meet their needs, customer service, customer retention. But then your employees are also very important because without them, who's doing the work? I can have a great vision and a great idea for my company, but if I don't pour into people or feed people and bring them along with me, I have no company because I can't do it all. And so if I were to rank importance, I would rank the importance around my people, my team, and then how are we serving our clients to make sure they get what they need? How are we reaching them? And I want to pour into my people. I want them to feel as if this is a team environment. I don't want to be the person at the top that you can't go and talk to. And I know we've all had bosses, leaders that, man, I just cannot talk to this person. If I do, they're mad or, they don't want to discuss it. But if we all have a spirit of care and pouring out and team, then we can develop this culture around a great vision and then start to put those pieces into action. So that's where I would go with it. That's how I would kind of do it. But I can see the disconnect. It's just CEOs at the top saying, hey, this is the vision, but we don't have a real plan.
That's so good. You need to have a plan. You have those vision casters, those D's and I's. Okay, if you haven't taken the disc, you guys need to take it because it is a big deal to understand the shape those in leadership, the shape of even your team members. But even if you think about every time I see a company or a new building coming up, maybe they're making a new restaurant, they normally probably have behind the scenes, okay, this is the vision, this is the mission. Then you have hire your leadership team. And then you hire your employees. And once you have all that together, train and plan, then we go get the clients. But there's a process in there. So you can't just say, okay, here's my mission and vision, let's go get the clients. Like I'm just thinking about when a company starts, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at what's the process? What's the mission and vision? All right, step 2, now we got to build a team. So the team is so essential. We need to make sure our team members, I always say our team members are those that push the mission and the vision. They're the ones that are going to have the customer interaction, because if you're at the top, you're the CEO, your goal is to focus on reaching those objectives, making sure that vision is followed through. And then now again, you hired that leadership team, you hired those employees, those team members that are going to be able to interact with those clients. They're the first touch point with their clients. And if you aren't doing your part to pour into them, to support them, to understand them, to be able to communicate to them, communicate with them effectively, it's going to pour into or might affect that client revenue, that client stream. So I definitely think that you need to ensure the people within your organization, they get enough care and development, because essentially if you're focused on the internal, the outpouring on the external is going to be beneficial. Even if you think about personal development, I'm big on personal development, especially when it comes to leaders, because I used to say that, I was leading through my trauma. So I had to do some internal work to identify the trauma, remedy the trauma, work on the internal, and then it was more beneficial on the external. So that's why it's so important that even on the inside of an organization, you have to make sure you remedy, support, do your part necessary to retain, develop those inside, because then the outpouring on the outside, when your clients come in, they're going to get that Chick-fil-A experience. They're going to have that amazing experience like when they walk in, because you have done your work inside. And I think we lose track of that because we sometimes focus so much on the external and the clients and doing whatever necessary for the client, but then we lose track and we're not pouring into the team that is pushing that mission and vision. It's future. You have that future cast, but your team essentially is going to help you get there. So now that you got this feedback, Corey, what you got to say about that?
Yeah. So look, catch this, y'all, and all of y'all out there listening, catch this. You hear the theme that's going on. And y'all know me. Look, I'm gonna break the triangle offense out, right? So you got the data, the process, and the people, right? And so typically, so you got your triangle here, you got data and you got process, but you got to put people on the bottom, right? And then some people say, oh man, why are you putting people below the whatever? But that's your foundation, right? So you got a lot of companies who say, oh well, we're doing this for our shareholders, we're doing this for the stakeholders in the companies, the ones who's buying stock or the ones who have partial ownership and all that stuff. And to be honest with you, in today's society, why are we doing it for the shareholders? Because the reason I say that, the minute the company doesn't go in a direction, I'm on Robinhood selling my stocks. I'm on E-Trader selling my stocks. The stocks may dip, somebody else comes over. So it's a completely different shareholder, right? All of a sudden we're doing good as a company, and then, oh man, business is booming, so we're retaining all the shareholders. So a lot of companies will say, well, I'm just doing everything for my shareholders to make sure that the people who actually have ownership in the company are doing. Don't worry about that, right? That's an output. Worry about the input, where, as they said before, it's your people, right? So if you focus on people and it starts to build and it starts to build, and I want y'all to start filling up the triangle, it starts to build and build and build. And then the data and the process comes along, and that starts to be held up by your people, right? But what happens is they go in with data and say, hey, based on this, the process is absolutely correct because I got the data to back it up. And they never empower the people, right? They never give the people the power to say, in this framework, do your thing, like do what you need to do, right? And so all of a sudden the sides start caving in because we got all this data, all this process, but the people aren't rising to the occasion because the people don't feel like this is theirs, this is them, they own it, right? I'll give you an example. I just went to Whataburger the other day. Shout out to all my Texas people. I just went to Whataburger, right? I'm on the app, and on the app it says, I get it was like a free honey butter chicken biscuit, right? And so I go into the drive-through, and I had ordered online. I did what it said. It said click the button, order it online, right? Go through the drive-through. They said no, that's not how you're supposed to order it. So I pull off to the side. I click the button again, put a different order through the curbside thing. So the one of the employees comes out and says, no, well, I don't think that's how you're supposed to do that. And I said, well, look, I paid for this food right here. Showed them my receipt. I paid for the food. I said, you can see like the date on this coupon right here that says that I get it for free, right? And she was like, well, yeah, but we can't really do that. And I was like, what? Why not? So long story short,
You wanted that honey butter.
yeah,
You wanted that biscuit.
another person. It was about to expire too, so I'm like, I gotta get it. So it comes out like somebody else comes out. They look at it. Yeah, I think you got to pull around back through the drive-through. And I'm like, wait, what? Why? I was just in the drive-through, right? And so snap back forward. Then a manager comes out, and then the manager just says, "Oh yeah, we'll just take care of that. Like, don't worry about it. I can see that it hasn't expired. It's right there. Whatever. I can do that." But catch the message behind that, right? Everybody else was afraid to act and afraid to do the same thing that the manager said that was okay to do. Why? Because those people probably aren't empowered. There's a framework of what needs to happen, and everybody else is like, no, I think you should go here. No, I think you should go there. No, go over there. And simply the manager just comes out and says, hey, here's this $2 chicken sandwich that you were trying to order. You know, that's the empowerment of the people. That lets me know that at that particular location, I'm not knocking Whataburger because I've gotten great service from there, but that lets me know in the grand scheme of things, there's something in place and they're not being empowered to be able to make a decision, right? You go up to certain airlines, right? You go to one airline, that airline says, oh yeah, don't worry, we'll switch your flight for you. That's fine. You go to another airline, they're like, oh, I can't do that. Why? Because I'm afraid to deviate from what our process is, because I might lose my job. I might get reprimanded for it. And although the company is pushing your customer, your process doesn't say that. But when you pour into your people, when you push your people and you empower your people and you say, you know what, I get it. You might be the most entry level person here, but you still have power. You might have gotten a couple of promotions. You still got some power to make some decisions. And you know what, on hindsight, even if you make a decision that I'm like, I don't really know what that's about. Was it for the customer? Did it cost us an arm and a leg to be able to do this thing? I'm gonna support you. That's fine. You made the right call. And I think you start to see your employees move differently. And so that's when you start to see the triangle start filling up. It starts filling up. And then your people start to say, I got the data. I understand the data. I understand the process, right? And now all of a sudden you got that well-oiled machine where you're sitting here saying, okay, cool. I don't have to worry about being a customer first place, because naturally we're customer first, because my people say, I'm going to do whatever it is to make the customer happy. They want to work for you. They want to show up. They want to promote. Like, that's leadership, right? You get to a point to where they say, you know what? I'm just going to take ownership of this situation. I don't have to look for my manager for this. I'm just going to own it right now. So those are the types of things I think we hit it spot on. You got to start with the employees. I think, yes, you need the processes and the data and the vision and all this stuff. But if you don't pour and empower into your employees, you're going to have it all day and not run as effectively as you could.
And oh man, I just want to hit on the point where you talked about look at how many interactions you had to have before a manager came out. But just imagine if after that one incident, or that person that's saying, okay, well, it doesn't work, that second time, you could have been like, I'm done. I would never go to Whataburger ever again. And that's why it's so important that we're pouring into our team members, because they are that first interaction that they're having with the clients. That experience needs to be up to par. And I love what you talked about, empowering them, because if that same process, if it was essentially the manager was going to say, oh, well, just give it to me, we'll take care of it. Are you empowering your people and giving them the tools? So there's the communication is around the board where everybody knows, okay, if we run into this issue, how do we address it? Like, for instance, for me, if that would have happened and there was a communication thing as the manager, hey, it happens. It does happen. Sometimes there's a communication gap. Maybe people don't understand. Maybe you dealt with all new people that started working there. So I hope the follow through for that manager was, okay, what happened? Let's talk about it. You sit down with everyone. Well, I thought this, I wasn't sure this, I got trained this, I wasn't sure. Then now I talked about swimming lessons, right? So I talked about swimming lessons and how, people go through swimming lessons and how leaders should never let their team members drown. So just imagine, I've heard those stories where the way I learned how to swim is that Somebody just threw me in the pool and I had to figure it out. I was like, leaders don't ever let your people drown because, yeah, you let them figure it out and then you wake up in the hospital and you're like, why'd you make me drown? You know, you never know how that might turn out. However, you can either assist the person or go save them. So, for instance, when my kids had, when they went through swim lessons, there was a phase where they got enough tools and strategies where now the leader in the pool was able to step back and say, okay, Samuel, you got it. Don't forget, do this, that. And they threw little tips out there. But there were moments where my son jumped in the pool and he's like freaking out that you had to go out and do the save. And then after that, that swim captain or that swim leader broke it down and said, okay, this is what we need to work on. You didn't lay this way, you didn't swing your arms this way. Okay, great. But how many managers are taking time to do that? So the next interaction they have with another person that has that same issue, that doesn't happen again, because literally after that first interaction, like you went above and beyond, Corey. I would have been like, I'm done. Now that doesn't mean I wouldn't have gone to Whataburger again, but I've been like, you know what, forget the coupon. I don't know what I would have done, but potentially that could have also led to a loss of client. And again, that's why it's so important that you do not let your team members drown. You go in and assist and save, and then also utilize those time to teach lessons and re-engage and empower them so they know how to interact with that team member, interact with that client that comes their way. Because again, they're the ones that are boots on the ground that are going to have that first interaction with your team members. So that's my take on that. Anything else
Yeah,
for you,
and check this out. No, check this out. So you talk about that too, right? One of the things that leaders need to get comfortable doing is in that scenario that I'm sure that person came back in there because they sent somebody back out, right? I'm sure somebody came back in there and said, "Hey, this is the issue. This is what we're looking at. Yada yada yada." Right? So look, it's 6 words, right? It's 6 words in this question form. What do you want to do? And I want the person to tell me what they want to do, and then I want to empower that person to say it, unless it's some outrageous thing, because I'm pretty sure the employee walked back in there and was like, yeah, everything checked out fine, but that's the thing, what do you want to do? Okay, cool, you want to do that, let's go do that, go save the day for them. And I empower a lot of people to do that themselves with it. Yeah, it might not be part of the per se process, or it might not be in their job function or whatnot, but at the end of the day, people want to be able to make decisions. You're either building or breaking relationships. Guess what just happened for that employee? I just built the relationship with them because I empowered them. What do you want to do? Oh, you want to go give it to them? Sure, go save the day, right? Then for the customer, they say, okay, well, what do I want? What do y'all want to do, right? So from there, they say, oh, such and such came back out and gave me the thing, right? Okay, cool. Oh man, that was a great experience, right? So everyone wins, and it was simply you verified this. Like you, all you did was verify the information, and that was that. Like, so yeah, it's just what do you want to do? Empower your people. That's real powerful when it comes to when people ask you questions.
And that's good. And what I heard and what I took from you guys talking about this is a lot of leaders burn out. A lot of CEOs get fed up, or a lot of management teams they switch, and it's because they feel like they have to do all the work. But you are causing or bringing that upon yourselves sometimes. And I've done it from my personal experience. If someone is not doing the job as fast as I want them to do it, or it doesn't go quite right, I say, you know what, I'll do it myself. And that's probably what the manager did. They came back in there twice. The manager's like, okay, I'm gonna go handle this myself. But at that juncture, you're taking away the power, and now your team members, that's the default. Instead of them being empowered to make decisions, to do the next thing, to take initiative, they just gonna throw their hands up and be like, you know what? I'm gonna let my boss take care of it. I ain't gonna have anything to do with it. So as a leader, we're investing in our people, and that part of that leadership development teaches us that, okay, for me to alleviate some of my stress, I need to be able to delegate. I need to be able to understand how to delegate that information, and then what decisions can I make within my power. What When we think back to the Ellen DeGeneres show, when those people went in 2018 and made those complaints, what happened? Was it an HR person that felt like, you know what? They brought this to me. I can't really do nothing about it. And instead of them pushing it to the next level, it had to have, there was a gap somewhere where somebody ignored it or dropped it or forgot it, because now it's popping back up in 2020, and they're saying, you know what, in 2018 is when we actually started this. You didn't hear us then. Now we're in a culture of cancel culture. I'm just gonna go on the internet and make it heard. And now you actually have to do something, which had that person in that position that first got that complaint handled it appropriately, or even went or felt they maybe they didn't feel comfortable going up to the next level. Maybe they were like, you know what, I ain't finna lose my job. So we don't know what happened in that instance, but I can see so many different layers of just not being comfortable and not knowing the proper chain of command to go to handle a situation. So the success of a company depends on how you empower your people. How are you
Yeah.
pouring into your people? How are you give what kind of tools are you giving them? And is there structure? I'm gonna beat it over the head with structure, with goals, process, because everything sounds great, but are you really doing this thing? And it's evident that 2018 they had some complaints. 2020 is hitting the fan. Somebody didn't follow a plan, if it was
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, and that's important to see because it's like what was the breakdown in the structure? So if a complaint happened in 2018, yes, it's identifying was it a like a human that was like, listen, I can't escalate it because I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to get in trouble. Was it a system issue? Like did the individuals know the right systems? Did they tell the right person? Maybe there was something in the process and they didn't realize how to escalate it or take it to the next step. So it's really identifying where was the breakdown? And once you identify the breakdown, now it's coming up with a system and a process to remedy it. And one of the things that Warner Brothers was going to create is a hotline. So, okay, so what's the system behind that? And hoping that they're educating their team members to say, okay, when you call this hotline, this is what's going to happen. And this is how long it's going to take. You're going to get a resolution between 30 to 60 days. And it might mean that you might have mediation. It might mean that there's going to be an accountability process, or it might mean that there might be some disciplinary action. But again, that is a system that works. And not only that, if you have a system, making sure that you're utilizing the system that you have. I know I'm saying system a lot. Tyrus got me in that mode. But that's the thing. What if there was a system in place, but the system wasn't followed? And now you have to look at it. Okay, now you're saying, oh, the system is good, but now it's the people. So if it was an individual that didn't feel comfortable, why was that? Now it's a people issue. Now we have to remedy and find out what it is that made you uncomfortable, or what it is that made you say we're not going to escalate this because we're more worried about the external, again, the stakeholders versus or the shareholders versus the stakeholders, the people that are actually within. Okay, now we have to remedy that. So definitely they have to take time and identify what happened, why it happened, fix that, remedy it, and hopefully that will benefit them in the rise back into where they were. Because again, a lot of people are not having it. We're living in a space where, again, the future is diverse. Diversity is a demand, equal treatment, respect. It is something that people are looking for. Their accountability is now something that people are looking for, because in the past it was kind of like, well, when it comes to my job, I just go and it is what it is. But even accountability is being asked. So even now, it's not that, hey, take action, but what's your accountability process going to be behind that? What are you going to do? What are your demands? Like, for instance, we know the NBA, and a lot of sports leagues and sports teams were like, okay, we're not going to play. And then today I read that they had X amount of demands. They figured it out, they worked it out, and now this is the resolution. But then also having that follow through on the back end to make sure you have a maintenance plan, another system that's going to make sure that you are maintaining that process. So there's so many layers that need to be remedied, but it's identifying if you have a system, if you're actually following it, and if it's not, is it a human issue? And if it's a human issue, remedying it with another system.
All the
Systems.
systems. But
Listen,
look,
I might have said that 100 times. Okay.
I'm gonna just tell y'all this though, and y'all talked about like when things aren't remedied and the system wasn't in place for you to figure that out. Don't be mad when leaders leave, and now they're on the internet and they're within your company and they're rising up and saying, I don't have to deal with this no more. Don't be mad when leaders leave.
That's good, Corey.
Yeah, that's good.
And another piece that I'm thinking about with this is we have to get away from the fear culture. I think with a lot of companies, there's a fear factor that if I do complain, something might happen to my job. And we have the system. I think that's the first and foremost piece, a process, a standard, a procedure, a method of going through. But then, Aisha, as you talked about the right people. So is it a possibility that it got to a point and that person was like, you know what, I ain't doing nothing about this, or they reprimanded, you know what, if you really want your career, you just be quiet. You don't want to take it any further. And that has been the norm in that culture for so many years. And now we're in 2020 and things are changing. We're not standing for that anymore. So, as an employee or as a middle management, lower level, make sure that you're being accountable and sticking to the process. We don't want just a vision and goal and plan to be written. Like, for instance, the HR person and the hotline that now they can call if they feel like something's going on. Well, when they call that, I want to see some action behind it, put some teeth in it. And I don't want to see any more of the, well, now that it's hit the fan, we're going to oust three of the people that was involved. They spent 2 more years since 2018 of doing what they were doing. It took you that long. And now to, I see it as scapegoating, honestly. Yeah, they may have did it, but now you're scapegoating them just to remove them completely so that your organization isn't looked at in a funny light. Well, Ellen did something. She fired three people, or Warner Brothers fired three people. But how many other individuals are they allowing to continue to do this before they make these concrete changes?
Yep.
Yes, yes. I mean, no, go ahead, Corey.
No, I was just like, yep, that's exactly it.
Yeah. I mean, and again, we're looking at two areas. It's identifying is it the system or is it the people? And if it's either or, what are you going to remedy it? It is easy to and there are going to be situations where you just have to cut ties and fire that person 100%, but also making sure that moving forward, the new people that you're bringing in, what is, like I said, that system? What are you going to do to make sure that individuals are being developed effectively? Because again, we put people into these roles because of maybe, oh man, they're able to like bring in so much revenue. They have all these network connections. And you look at the external aspect and maybe skills in certain areas, but if they don't have effective employee management, people management skills, then again, you're going to have this happen again. So when it comes to rising again, it's really, you have to rebuild the trust. You have to, your team members are having to really like trust you all over again. So everything that you're doing is going to be watched now. Everything that you're going to do, they're going to be like, okay, I called the hotline. They said they were going to get back to me in 30 days. They better get back to them in 30 days. Okay, I called them. Okay, the 30 days they did it. Now, are they going to really hold this person accountable? Hold the person accountable. So you have to make sure that everything you do as you're rebuilding the trust and you're rising again, that you're following through, that you're doing the work necessary. So on the outside, we're seeing the show's back, yay. However, internally, people are suffering. So you have to make sure you have that follow through. And I think that is extremely important. So those are some of the remedies we talked about in this first part. I mean, I think it was so important that we highlighted mission, vision, values, understanding what that is and when people lose sight of it. And then also talking about what's more important. We have to remember, and I think we came to a consensus that the team is important. You have to make sure the team are right. And then when you put leaders in place, you have to make sure they have the right fit, identify their behavior styles, identify what gaps they have, and if they have a communication issue or an accountability issue or a conflict resolution issue, so you can resolve that. And then also identify the systems you have in place and make sure those are remedied, as well as the people systems you have into place, because there are people within those systems that people have to interact with. So let's go around and have any last words before we, transition to, our next phase of our day.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to say though was that made me think about this as we were talking. I sat down with individual, he's a supervisor, right? I sat down with him and he was saying, Corey, I'm swamped because I can't get my work done. The managers keep telling me to do stuff. Yeah, I get it. I'm good at my job, but they just keep throwing stuff at me and keep throwing stuff at me. And he was like, I don't want to say no. And I was like, well, what's the reason why? He said, because I don't want to get blacklisted from any promotions. I don't want to, get put into another. So the thing is, as companies, especially as leaders, members of management, executive, level people, are we stifling our teams? Are we kind of like boxing them in? Because we always throw this term out here. Well, what does your brand look like? And then you start at work and you're like, well, is that really good for your brand? Or if you turn down this project, is that really good for your brand? Just realize that statement doesn't come across empowering as, okay, what does my brand look like? Well, let me go ahead and fix it, right? It can, but you're trying to get something from me, and you know that you keep piling things on, but you're trying to leverage and pull on my heartstring of my competitive nature or my will to want to do better by saying, what's my brand? And so all of a sudden, then you're tugging on my emotion now, and I'm like, I guess I'll go do it. Like I don't want to make these people upset, or maybe when I apply for a promotion, then they'll look at me negative because I didn't take this project. And so ultimately, we sat down and said, you know what? We got to start learning how to say no. And it's not a bad thing. It's not something that will necessarily bring you into the wrong direction, because you have to start taking ownership over your position, over your life and your team, right? A lot of things that we always tell, supervisors, managers, think about it. If it was your business, how would you run your business? Would you want your business? Well, in my business, do I want to just take on 7,000 projects? Maybe not. Maybe I do want to take them on. But that's one of the things, and I guess that's my final take on it is, especially when we're empowering the leaders to empower their team, are we really like kind of snuffing their flame out by using terms like that to say, well, what's your brand? Why aren't you doing this? Is that good for your brand? And then you're putting them in a position to say, you know what, I'm gonna just have to do this, and I'm gonna just have to be quiet about it.
Hmm, that's good. I I'm remembering back to when I worked in this office and we had our lead. He was the branch chief, and toxic environment. He would come in, things like, "Who want to get fired today?" Like, what's the point in you asking that? And he just had that attitude, and so his bosses got wind of that because people were leaving left and right. The turnover was horrible in there, and when his bosses got word of that, they made him come and apologize. And so this was his apology. He had all of us in this meeting, and what they did do was there was a separation though. We had middle management, and then it was him. We should have never been interfacing with him directly, but he brought us all into this room, no middle management, and his apology was this: if I did anything to anybody, I'm sorry. If anything that I said offended anybody, any kind of way, I'm sorry. He did not take ownership for his attitude, for what he did, for his culture and climate that he was creating. He just had to make an apology because now the higher ups were hearing that people were upset and they lost some great people. When I look at this whole thing with the Ellen show, she came out, she made a statement about people not being able to look her in the eye and not being able to talk to her on set, and she said, "Oh, it's not true," but she apologized to anyone who felt disregarded. What does that mean? Either you did it or you didn't do it. And
Right.
if you didn't mean to do it, now look at yourself internally as the leader. You're the face of the show. What is it that could be, or how can a perception come off as you don't want to be bothered? Or even if you are introverted and quiet personally, and you come out on the show and you know you're more extroverted because that's what it calls for, what is it about the people, or what is it about you that they're feeling like, hey, I can't really go and talk to her? So maybe there were some things going on in 2018 and people just felt like, hey, she has this certain attitude, or they perceive that. Now I don't feel like I have a gateway to go up. I don't have that chain of command. And even though this is supposed to be one of the more friendly environments, it's not very friendly when you're dealing with the same core culture of the middle-aged white male that sit in all the leadership positions. As I'm not a female, but I can think that if I was in that position, who who is watching who and who is going to hold who accountable when they're all the same, or when they're all alluding or seem like they're the same. So picking the right leaders and developing those leaders. Not only do you need to catch, and like Aisha was talking about, finding those right people based on and understanding their behavioral tendencies, their gaps, their limitations. Now, how do I develop those people and help them close that gap? Because no leader is perfect. What is that leader's style? And then how can we reinforce or strengthen that style to make sure that they lead in the right way and make sure that their team members have the ability to not only be empowered, but also that if something's wrong, they feel comfortable and safe enough to go and speak to that person to remedy whatever issues may be going on. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and just remember that if you decide to go into a leadership position, that is what it's going to take in order for you to lead. You are going to recognize throughout this process there's going to be some development. I recognize, I fell into something called promotion anxiety recently. I was reading about it and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. You have a lot of people who get elevated into different leadership positions, but as you're moving up in the leadership chain, there is going to be a different scope of responsibility, and people start to not feel confident enough. They don't believe that they can execute at that level. So now they might even revert to just what they were doing prior and not recognizing, yeah, as you're moving from maybe the managerial level to now strategic thinking, and now you're a vision caster and you're looking at things from even like a bigger level, there is going to be a level of development that you need. So don't feel that at any point that you just have it all made. There's going to be different levels of development that you're going to need, from the first tier, mid tier, to now the C-suite level, and now you're the CEO, CFO, or whatnot. So know that if you are going to step into a leadership role and you're going to be leading a team, well, first off, know that you're a leader. Like, if you're stepping into a role where you have a team behind you, you are now officially, for sure, 100%, you're a leader. And of course, we need to have self-leadership as well. But knowing that comes with being able to communicate to different people with different behavior tendencies, developing yourself, learning how to develop others, and identifying the gaps and the areas they need to develop in, and also just recognizing that this is going to be a constant process as you move up in the chain. So just recognize that. And who knows, maybe these individuals that they were moving from executive producer and they were just going from different tiers, maybe then recognize that they had gaps, maybe even internally. Maybe they had personal things that made them that, or excuse me, maybe they had personal issues that they never remedied that now is trickling to the workplace, because your personal stuff can also fall into your leadership. If you do have, let's say, for instance, again, they mentioned sexual harassment. If you do have a personal issue in that area and you're not working on that as a leader, will it trickle into your business or into your brand or into your employee relationships and professional relationships? It potentially can. So I want to remind all leaders out there to make sure that you're constantly being developed, not just professionally. I have all the skills and abilities and so on, but also personally, because there's some things that you might need to remedy personally so it doesn't fall into the lap of your professional endeavor. So that's my take on it. Know you're a leader and then continuously develop as a leader. And that's why it's so important. And that's why I'm so happy that, I was about to call us ACE, but ACT Consulting and Leadership is, we came together with this group because that is our goal, to really embed that in leadership and developing individuals and really making organizational development look a lot differently. So you are that company of the future. So any last words, or take it away, Tyrus? Yeah, take it away.
First story.
No, I'm good. Well, I lie. I'll just leave them with this. Just remember, like Aisha said, like you can only lead people as far as you've gone, right? So in self leadership, if you've only made it to a certain point, you can only expect for people to follow you to that point, right? If you've been a leader in a corporate environment or a team, if you run any team, you can only lead people up to the certain point that you push yourself to go. So just understand that if you're not doing it, don't expect other people to do it. So yeah, that's all I got. Take it away, Tyrus.
Absolutely. So, guys, we definitely want to thank you for joining us. We are branching out and we have created ACT Leadership and Management Consulting to help companies and partner with companies to build those leadership programs in and make that a part of your corporate culture. It should be right along with vision, mission, and statement, organizational development and leadership training. So that is what we're bringing in. That is what we're offering. What we're doing with these lives and with these trainings are giving you insight into larger companies and to show that even at a high level, there's still organizational issues that could have been prevented, because we're about prevention. You don't want to wait till you get a lawsuit, but about prevention, to be able to prevent some of those issues that can come when you skip over your leadership development training or your organizational training. And again, if you want to reach out to us, You can reach us via our Facebook group, Act and Lead. We'll be posting contact information there for you soon. And next week's, we're going to talk about more of the diversity and inclusion piece. So once you start to develop your leaders, are you including everybody? Do you have a diverse workforce? Are your employees represented fairly and equally and equitably in your corporation? So once again, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next week.